What's up, Kelly? How's it going, my friend?
Mr. Greg. It's going good.
It's nice to connect with you. Uh, you and I have had some chats by the by about our TFC past and a little bit about your experience working on a mod for Half-Life 2 based on TFC called Fortress Forever. Um, and I'm really interested in just hearing from you a little bit about that because I think that you probably have some interesting anecdotes to share, and well, I think it's pretty cool.
The last time you were playing Planetside, do you want to start up the game again so we can get back into the feel?
Right. Yeah, Planetside. So, one of the things that I was talking with Matt and Taylor last weekend about this. One of the things about Planetside that I love is it's a game that's given me the closest, like, kind of feeling that I used to have when I played Team Fortress Classic, where it's like there's a community of people that you see like all the time, and you have your rivalries and you have your allies, and like there's a whole like kind of teenage gang component. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's the whole thing that ended when Modern Warfare 2 came out, and then there was no more game servers, and everything was just online, click matchmaking go. But
Yeah,
I'm
why did that
assuming
happen?
Planetside was Modern Warfare 2, I think. Didn't that start it? Or the first one, maybe?
You could be right, honestly.
That was like the canary in the coal mine for will gamers on PC let us control the experience from top to bottom
Right.
instead of running their own servers and doing that whole thing.
Yeah, because now every shooter or action game that comes out where there's like an instanced kind of mode where you go for 30 minutes or 50 minutes or until you get to the end of the railway, whatever. These are all hosted by game companies now, and there's no way for you to get in there and like change the experience around. Whereas back in the day when you and I butted heads playing Team Fortress Classic, um, we were the ones who were hosting the servers.
Yeah, now games are single player online only. It's like the opposite of it. But yeah,
Gosh,
I mean, we it's just a big change, I guess. But it's not been completely. I mean, it's not that way everywhere. It's still like Minecraft is wildly popular, and it's made a name for itself with all the mods and stuff that the community makes. So it's still around. It's just kind of a weird dichotomy, I guess, now where there's all these big games that are doing it the
yeah, that
Call of
game's a
Duty
phenomenon.
way. Yeah, yeah. I play Minecraft with my daughter. We're getting way off topic though, aren't we?
Oh, it's all good, man. Um,
but yeah, like we'll start back with Fortress Forever. I mean, we started working on that way before. Like you read the recent criticism in the Catacombs Discord about the old TFC guys complaining about it, but
yeah, I've seen that, and I've scratched my head a little bit. Um, I
like,
guess
what do you
it's
want?
funny. Yeah, it's funny. Like okay, so my impression as a hardcore old school TFC player, I quit TFC like in 2005. And Fortress Forever came out in I think 2007. So there was a 2 year gap for me coming back to it, but I was pretty excited about it. And when I got into it, the feeling that I had is, oh my god, this is like a really great feeling game that actually feels like Team Fortress Classic. 1.5. I know that's confusing because that's technically what it was called already, but and
Yeah,
it
well,
felt
TF2.
smooth. Like
Yeah,
I remember being like, okay, but are rocket jumps and conks gonna feel right? Is bunny hopping gonna feel right? Is ramp sliding gonna work? And every single point, I was like, check, check, check. Like, wow.
yeah. I mean, at the end, Kyle and I did fish. Kyle, project lead when we launched Fortress Forever. We probably pushed like for the last few months, just getting all of that stuff dialed in. He and I did a lot of just him and I playing around with the dev builds. We had variables for all of those. Like every single thing you could control, or sorry, everything you could do in the game was controlled by console variables that you could basically have arc onto the server and change on the fly. As many of them as possible you could do on the fly, which was possible in Source, not before in the Half-Life 1 engine, I think. So it
It's
took a
cool.
long time to get it tweaked the way that we wanted it. And the idea, of course, like you said, was to do a TFC 1.5. There was no TF2. TF2 was vaporware when we started the project, right?
Yeah, it was Brotherhood of Arms.
Yeah, that was not going to be a game that any one of us wanted to play in the way that it was being shown at the time, which we obviously had no idea what it was going to become. So you can consider like the community had done so much on our own already at that point. So there was a project, it was under wraps for a long time before it was ever announced, obviously. So there was some guys that had been working on kind of continuing, having continuity for the Team Fortress community after TFC was waning, right? So we had people that were putting that project together sort of stealthily and planning on using the Source SDK, but that got delayed again as well. So like the whole thing was it was all delayed after delayed of just not, being able to start the project in a timely fashion. But then
Oh,
we did get things underway, and it got into much more active development around that same time frame that you're mentioning, from 2004 to 2007, basically,
so it took
with
about
the Half-Life 2
three
release.
years to like basically once you guys were able to get your hands on the SDK, it sounds like you were just going great guns on it. Is that right?
Yeah, and we were worried that if things were going to be successful, we didn't want to reuse any of the assets from Half-Life 2 or from anything else. So that was another big thing, is we wanted to build it all from scratch, which, again, like I mentioned in the Catacombs Discord briefly, we were
Was that
probably
like a
biting off more than we should have. We bit off more than we could chew, insofar as we had to hire people to do all of, everything. All the sound was all custom, everything was made. Music, sound, textures, models, everything. It was completely from the ground up with its own game. Like if you were to do this now, like you see Black Mesa selling their game for $20 or whatever, like we would have been in that same boat had we developed it now. At that time, it was the end of the modding community, right? Mods were over,
yeah,
and it was switching to this the Steam 2.0 platform. With the modern Steam as we know it was sort of evolving at that time as well.
yeah, yeah. Talking about Steam, one of the things I learned about you recently is that you have a four-digit Steam ID.
Yeah. We were testing that early on. At that time, as you probably know, 404, the clan I was in TFC, was active in testing stuff for Valve as it related to TFC. So it was only natural that we would go and get on the early TFC Steam beta, because I think in the
Sure,
beginning they were trying that and Counter Strike, right, as the first two, probably Half Life DM or whatever.
sure.
They were
So can
releasing
we
those in Steam.
can we actually back this up like just a few steps? So I'm trying to put together the picture in my mind of like Dospac, the fortress player. Like you've from hearing everything you're saying, it's really clear that you had a huge amount of involvement. Like for me, I'm kind of more a part of this franchise as like a fan and community member. Like I ran my clan. I shit posted a lot on the cesspool and the catacombs, but um you were around, I think, both before and after I started and stopped playing TFC. So maybe I'm curious, how did you even like get into TFC in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. We, my friends and I were all playing Half Life when it came out. So I think at one point they released, the TFC patch for Half Life, which basically added the game, or the TFC mod to
This
the
is like
game, to
your
Half
like
Life 1.
IRL friends or people you played with
Yeah,
online
yeah.
already? Gotcha.
Yeah, real life friends mostly, I think at that point.
Yeah, and
There
when
was a
this happened,
forum.
it would have been the late '90s, and there was no way to really connect with people online to to do
Yeah,
this kind
so
of
it was
stuff. It was always
98,
your IRL friends.
98, and then 2000, I think April of, sorry, 99. It was 98, 99 time frame. But yeah, exactly. We were all sneaker netting CDs, or what would that have been? Yeah, I guess it would have been CDs at that point, of the
Yeah,
patches to each other. But yeah, no, so we were, you're on dial up and you have to download this huge patch for the game, and the game doesn't auto update, right? You're just trying to play. If you try to play online, you just got an error that hi, your game doesn't match the version on the server.
yeah,
go go get fucked. What does that mean? So you're like, oh crap, I better, like, I don't even know. I don't remember exactly. There may have been like an HTTP redirect to get you to a website to download the patch from like the One network or something at that time. I don't even remember it. Like,
yeah.
how did we get
One,
patches in the early days of the internet? You
I
just
don't
manually had to
remember.
go down and find it somewhere and then run it on your computer, right?
Yeah, for me, the way I remember that kind of stuff working is like I started playing in TFC public servers, like because the game just was interesting to me, and Half-Life 1 mods were the only things I could play on the shitty dial-up connection I had at the time. And for this would have been 2001 for me when I would have been getting into it.
Oh wow, so you came later. Well, you're younger than me,
Yeah,
so that makes sense.
yeah. I was part of like I missed the whole first wave of competitive TFC. And but yeah, so I played it, and then I saw clans in the server, and then I just bugged them. I'm like, hey, your clan seems cool. Can I join? And they're like, oh, download this program, IRC, Internet Relay Chat, and come chat with us there. And that's kind of where the whole community started opening up, and you learned about where to download patches. But other than that, I have no recollection.
Yeah, we basically got TFC, and we didn't know anything. I didn't even know like what the maps were or anything. Like you just kept on playing the same. It was like Well, Rock Two for it, and
Badlands.
Hunted. Badlands wasn't out then. In the beginning, it was Well, Two Fort, Rock Two, and
Right,
Hunted. There might have been one more. I think that was it though. Then
right.
Community Maps came out soon afterwards. But no, so we played that. I really got into it when there was a the PC game magazine, PCXL, PC Accelerator at the time, was around for a couple of years. Uh, we on the PCXL forums, everyone started playing this game, Team Fortress Classic. So we started a clan on there, and that's really how I got into the community. But
Cool.
that was in
So an
August, so
online forum
April to
community
August.
based on a gaming magazine. Is that right?
Yeah, so we
Wow.
asked the guy, like the editors, they were here in the Bay Area, and
Uh-huh.
we just started playing on. You start using that tag, it's a pop. It's like using the PC gamer tag. People are like, oh, do you work for? Like, oh no, we're just like the game community from their forum. But we like someone had a server, so we're playing on there, and the guys found out about it. They were all playing the game too, so
Uh-huh.
people are like Maximum PC, PC Gamer, PCX. All those guys were playing TFC at that time. So
Yeah, boy, it was a small world back then. Like,
yeah, it was a lot smaller, and they all knew like it was. If you had a dial up, you were also very regionalized, right? So if you were on dial up in the Bay Area,
yeah,
you were playing on Bay Area, LA, maybe Seattle servers, but you weren't messing with further east because the ping would be impossible. This was before the netcode patch, before the patch that added the client prediction side.
right. And it was that
They
that
registration.
netcode that really helped me get into it. Actually, the story I like to tell uh, is that for Christmas, this would have been when I was, I guess, in high school. My parents got me Quake 3, Half Life, and Unreal Tournament for as gifts, and
Yeah,
I sat down to play all
it was an
three,
epic
and
Christmas.
yeah, completely, it literally changed my life. Um, and Unreal Tournament was fun because I could play offline with bots, but that only went so far. Quake 3, you can't play on dial-up. At least you couldn't. Just netcode wasn't built for it. But Half Life, you could do. Um,
Yeah, you can totally do it with the
is that netcode?
client. That 110 whatever 1100 badge, 1.1 badge.
Yeah. So for maybe it'd be useful just to. I'm curious. This is a strange question I wrote down earlier that I think would be cool to hear your answer for. In your own words, how would you describe the game of Team Fortress Classic?
I mean, it was just very influential. I would say it was the first online team-based game that had like a very very strong emphasis on having there be offense and defense playing together at the same time, and you were playing together as a team. It wasn't just who can get the most frags. Like the Quake 3 or Quake 2, Quake 1 deathmatch. I'm sorry, the capture the flag modes from the Quake games were not. There was very little tactics or strategy or anything. You were just going and DMing and then get the flag. If you didn't kill everyone and get it home, that was the end of your run because the flag just returned immediately when the other
Right.
team touched it.
And that
So
really
adding those,
distinguished the touch returns versus the timed returns that Team Fortress Classic
yeah,
had for its capture the flag mode made a big difference in the way that played.
yeah. So having teams that were working around real objectives, I think it was definitely unique for that. And that was, obviously in Quake World TF, the first version of the game. Uh, I didn't
Wasn't
have a good enough computer to play Quake, so that was why I didn't really get into.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
I
in the
bought
same
a
boat as
Voodoo
you there.
2. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering in my head. Team Fortress Classic was the first game I got exposed to that had class design in it that wasn't just like, an RPG with, warrior, mage, priest, that kind of stuff. Um, was TFC or was Fortress the game that introduced class-based gameplay to shooters?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's obviously the other big part of it.
Yeah,
There
and
might have been
that's
other ones.
that's evolved now. Like I took a few years off from gaming in the early 2010s, and when I came back, one of the games that first got me excited was Overwatch, and because I saw in it like the next evolution of what do you do after class-based gameplay, after class-based team-based, what's the next thing? And it kind of took the idea of a class and personified them and made them characters. Um,
Yeah, there were people now with their own stories.
it really surprised me like how long it took. um I think that class-based gameplay that Team Fortress Classic had was so cool, and in a lot of ways, I it, it just surprises me that from when Fortress came out first, which was I think in was it '96 that Quake Fortress came out.
Yeah, the first Quake World TF
So
builds are that
96
same year, I think.
to 2015. It took 20 years in my mind for that class formula to be meaningfully iterated on in any kind of way. And it blows my mind how ahead of its time Fortress was in that regard.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you've got tribes, much like fewer classes. The Battlefield games try to define like four different roles, right? Like the medic, sniper,
Yeah,
support, and but that's still only four. Like making it fit with 9, and now what Overwatch
yeah.
has got to be at 30. or more now or something. It's kind of insane. I haven't played Overwatch lately.
Yeah, Overwatch
But yeah,
is.
that's you have Quake World, TF into TF2 into Overwatch. Probably, I don't think there's anything meaningful in the middle there as far as that gameplay archetype goes.
Yeah. And one of the things that the TFC did that was so neat was, uh, whether intentionally or not, um, because of, I'm not sure why exactly, why the whole game mode formed around like 8v8 or 9 versus 9 capture the flag, but I love that multi-dimensional, like you were saying earlier, offense and defense on the same team, and the fact that the classes had were sufficiently different that actually there was a reason to play different classes, whether you're playing offense or defense or holding certain points. The design of those maps and of the game mode itself was really successful in making, well, honestly, probably 6 of the 9 classes were represented in competitive gameplay. Um,
Yeah, that was why it was different. In Counter Strike, you had a high level of teamwork and coordination, but you were still just playing one side as terrorists, whether it's counter terrorist, one is attacking, the other is defending the bomb site, or however you wanted to. There was no other game, even now, like Team Fortress 2. They were like, well, we'll throw in a capture the flag map on Two Fort or something. It was like an afterthought because it didn't work. So the focus is all on objectives that the team is fighting. One team is defending, the other team is attacking.
yeah, TF2 in a
Or
lot of
King of
ways.
the Hill.
Go ahead.
But yeah, so I mean, King of the Hill is the same way. You've got still all the teams are fighting over like a linear progression of points. Like it's basically the same thing. Like they're all essentially derivatives of the attack defend. Right?
Right. And I know that the Team Fortress community back in the day had a there was a smaller community of competitive attack defend players. Actually, my brother um, played TFC with some of those guys, but it never had the same. It didn't have the same strength of community, and it didn't have the same strength of competitive scene as the Capture the Flag, for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
attack defend obviously came out later once they added Dust Bowl and Avanti.
Yeah,
Can't remember what other maps there were, but I mean those players were typically just younger. I think they got into the game later. The first wave of the clan scene, the competitive scene, was all capture the flag.
that's what there
Um,
was.
yeah, because there was just no other choice. And then the players developed their skills based on that type of gameplay. And when you're just spamming grenades and attack defend, it doesn't really give you the same
Hmm.
opportunity
Hmm.
to fight. And especially because the maps, most of those maps are also designed with sort of like a push against a wall of defense, and you just sort of move that wall backwards. There's not like this same dynamic deathmatch element happening in those middle spaces, like we
Right.
talked about the offense and defense crossing each other, and that doesn't really exist in that other way of playing. But yeah, those players in general just came by later. I don't know. It's hard to really compare the two. There was all these different communities in Team Fortress, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, they
And
were fun. I mean, it was fun to play that game type. It was just once they came out with like the Logrens versions later, it got a lot better.
yeah,
was
grenades are one
right.
of those elements of that game that needed toning down, and that was one of the big things that you guys I noticed you guys changed in Fortress Forever.
Yeah, there was. I think I don't remember if the damage was just reduced or whether we
I think
actually
the
reduced
radius
the
was
radius
adjusted.
too.
Yeah, it was a big part of it.
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
don't
mean,
remember the
we
damage being much different, but also the availability, like the way that you can pick up grenade packs in a lot of TFC maps, or some of them are just designed to start you out with 4. God help you, or God help the defense. Um, but I remember that being a big part of Fortress Forever for the little time that I
yeah.
played
It,
it.
it took a while to reduce the map the grenade counts on maps in Team Fortress Classic. Like the map makers eventually figured out that you could do that, and like in the beginning, people just didn't realize. And then like Fried Bunny and TDA went and ripped out the entities in the maps and changed the amount of grenades, kept everything else identical because you can do that without the source files to the maps. So
Oh,
that's why we were
interesting.
able to change.
Just change some of
That's
the
how we were getting.
metadata. Huh.
Yeah, we were able to change all that. So that's how like open fire Logrens came about. And there was probably a version of that for like everything, oppose bases. All these maps got Logrens version 2 for it. Well, Defrag's 2 for it remake had
Huh.
less grenade.
Yeah, interesting. Huh. I didn't
But
know any of that stuff.
yeah, Defrag was really influential in the early, like when we first started playing in the European scene over here. He had brought a lot of stuff back over here, and some of that stuff went back to Valve too. Like their first beta patch for removing bunny hopping was epic fails. We were testing it, and it was like you could bunny hop 4 times faster. Like, hey guys, I don't think you can fix this the right way. Gonna have to dial that back.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
in the original game, Team Fortress Classic, bunny hopping was totally unconstrained, right? You can just
Yeah,
gain acceleration, gain speed forever. But what ended up going into the game was a change where if you were if you were going at 170% the speed of running after a jump, it basically slammed you to back to 50% movement speed or something like that, right?
I think it was 170 back to 110, 20, 30 or something like that. I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, in Fortress Forever, we tried to basically keep those numbers roughly the same, I think, but we just made it so that you didn't have to jump. Like you could just hold jump like in Quake and continue jumping. So you didn't
Didn't
have
you
to.
guys also change it so that
It slows you. There's a soft cap. It slows you back down to the cap,
right,
I think.
that's what it was, a soft cap instead of a hard cap. That's what I remember it being
Right.
different.
Yeah, that's right. So you could get faster for a little bit. It was supposed
How
to be like a compromise between Quake World TF, which never got a bunny hop movement
yeah.
nerf and suffers because of that, I think. But
How important
it's
do
a
you
different
think
different
those
argument.
movement mechanics were to Fortress?
I mean, that was like a huge deal, right? It was like a third pillar of aim and then like teamwork or whatever you want to say, smarts about how you play. And then adding this movement ability was pretty revolutionary too, I would say. So when player learned, it wasn't built into the game. Players learned it, right? It went on as the game progressed. The community got wiser to what you could and couldn't do, right? So there was like a huge change when bunny hopping was discovered. But there was other things, right? Like conking and rocket jumping were all originally not intended. So it went on and on. I mean, there was way more. The ramp sliding stuff and chop hopping, I guess, was probably one of the later ones.
Chop hopping.
And
Yeah.
something called C tapping in TF2, which was discovered, which I think works in the older versions of the game as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
No, I'm not. What is it?
Oh, there's a one of the pro TF2 players became well known for this ability. It's very hard to do, but and you have to have like the server performance has to be very. You have to have a fast server basically because it is recording the data. You have to catch it at the right time. Basically, you have to have a lot of updates going per second. So what you do is you basically just crouch and then you use the uncrouch animation, which shoots you up in the air to time your jump, whatever
Oh
you're
my god.
assisted with. So like that's called C tapping, crouch tapping. You basically tap crouch, and then as it uncrouches, you do your 180-degree, strafe rocket jump maneuver. But it's like 50% higher than a regular rocket jump, or 80% higher, or something like that.
That's awesome.
And there's like a signature on the map Badlands in TF2. There's like a signature jump that you can test it with because it's right at the very limits of the jump that you could of the ability, you should say. So everyone tries this the jump on Badlands to practice this jump, and it's useful too if you can do it. It's just very hard to do reliably, especially if you're getting shot at or the server's not performing well.
Yeah, that was one of the big shocks to me when I started playing Team Fortress 2. It's like, wait a sec, they removed concussion jumping? Wait a sec, they removed bunny hopping? Wait a sec, why is this so slow? I get kind of
Yeah,
a bit of a cruel thrill out of hearing that the community found something like that.
yeah. I mean, they added items later, like the gunboats, whatever. You could basically wear an item that would take away your secondary, take away your shotgun, but allow you to take vastly less damage from self rockets. So encouraging soldiers to be able to jump
Oh,
around. And you can skim off of walls and the ground easier in TF2, which is the way that the mechanics are with the RPG. So that added a lot of skill back to the game
huh.
with soldier. And then double jumping with a scout, but it's not the same as it was. And there's not like the conch jumping, ramp sliding, all that stuff is gone. I mean, maybe you can ramp slide if you can get fast enough. You probably still can, but it's not quite the same.
Is there anything in
But
Team Fortress 2 that compares with the speed that you could achieve in TFC?
yeah, if you're playing Rum Soldier doing those rocket jumps,
Hmm,
or just playing
okay.
Scout,
And Scout just has that native fast movement speed and double jumping, and that's what gets it for the Scout, right?
yeah, if you haven't watched Banny play Scout on Twitch, he still streams. I don't know if they're even playing competitively or if it's just all pug games that he plays, but he plays Scout pretty much exclusively. He played demo at the beginning of the TF2 competitive scene, I think.
Did you make the
But he's
transition
like
over
a
to TF2 when it came out?
yeah. I played a lot in the beginning with TDA, and then
Uh-huh.
we didn't really stick with it, so I quit. Probably for like a year, 6 months, 9 months, a year, something like that. And then there was a land competition in 2008 in San Jose, where I live, and one of the teams needed me, or rather needed a player, and knew I was around. But I told them like I haven't been playing TF2. I don't really. I'm not in the current meta. Like the meta when we played was different, right? When it just came out, we were playing capture the flag still, and crits hadn't been turned off, and by the server, and there was just a lot of variables that hadn't been tweaked, and the gameplay hadn't been finalized or whatever. The meta hadn't settled, right?
Right. People
but
didn't know how
we
to
did.
play it at a competitive level
Yeah,
yet.
exactly. But I played anyway. It was like APOC and some of her friends and some guys that were like pro players from other sports, other sports, other games.
Did you guys
We
win?
played other esports. We took third place, but this was like of a field of pro teams, so it was
Huh.
pretty good.
Sounds like a pretty fun event.
So they realized that I knew how to play like pretty quickly. The guys on my team and other teams were like, "Oh yeah, this guy knows what he's doing."
Okay.
So I sort of got offers into playing with some of these teams, and it's kind of like the intermediate level of ESEA at the time, which was like the or CEVO. I can't remember what it was, whatever the online pro am tournament was that you played online, but was the seeder for the live tournament.
So the
So I played a
2008
little bit.
competitive gaming scene looked a lot different than it does today, right?
Yeah, it was pretty established. I mean,
You think
like
so?
Dota was really big.
When did Dota come
Yeah,
out?
it's like it was being played for a while before that it was released,
Hmm.
and it was pretty
Okay.
established. It was just hard, like until some of the later, like Dota 2 came out. It was hard to do online, or sorry, on LAN, because there was just like you had to do really hacky stuff to get the game to. It was like a custom map for a different game. It's completely different. But Dota was really popular, so I remember that was there at the tournament, and Counter Strike was always being played. They had an Unreal tournament, whatever, 2K5 or 4 or 6, whatever it would have been at the time. I don't know what game they were playing. I lose
Yeah.
track of all the Unreal tournament versions, but like Lost
Okay.
Cause was playing. Rafiq, he played at that tournament and won the Unreal tournament solo tournament. He ended up playing on a TF2 team I was on later. So,
Sure.
but
So
the players that came from DM backgrounds were just never any good at Team Fortress. It was like this constant. It was never. It was always the same thing. They could never play the game. They could aim really well, but they didn't know what to do when it was like time for team coordination and pushes and withdrawing and stuff.
yeah, it requires a different level, different kind of approach to the game, where yeah, say a little bit. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. I don't actually know a lot about. Most of what I know about the deathmatch, like dueling shooter scene, comes from watching Lat play. Lat's our buddy, fellow ex-TFCer, although he came to the game a lot later than we did. But he like hits it hard with the dueling scene in Quake Champions, and that skill set obviously is very different than what you would want to use playing a team game like TFC.
Yeah, I mean that's just the stereotype is that they're focused on getting whatever kill is in front of them. But a lot of the times, what do you want to call it, trigger control or whatever. There's a lot of times where you need to leverage an advantage by not doing, not just killing the next thing you see or whatever. You want to basically restrain yourself and work with the team to sort of capture a more advantageous position instead of going for the easy kill or whatever, which
Sure.
sometimes it works, right? You still need to have those raw aim abilities, especially if you're playing scout in TF2.
Right.
Because that is pretty incredibly hard to aim when the other scout, especially against another scout. But yeah, I mean, I would say it's a stereotype that's mostly the same. I play PUBG with all the Quake players, and it's always the same thing too. With they're getting knocked and fighting in bad places when they should be retreating to cover and then engaging from the advantageous position, right? So it's just like a matter of when
Yeah.
they're playing that way, you're almost like the guy that's running behind them in those games, like offering support. So I can fall into support roles a lot because I'm like, well, you
It's
guys are
kind
all
of
going
like
to
you're the
die if I
dad of
don't.
the group, like watching the kids running around. Like,
Yeah,
okay, kids, you're out of position. What are we supposed to
yeah,
be
like
doing? Don't forget what
the
we talked about.
yeah, the classic situation in PUBG is they're gotten shot in the head by someone and they didn't see and are calling for a smoke grenade to cover them, and I'm like, I've already thrown one on them because I knew they were going to get knocked. It's like so it's funny watching the inevitable happen, right? You're just like,
That's funny.
but it does get frustrating after a while too, and you know, it's like being able to predict the future, right? Is after a while you're like, should just do this the right way the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's I have, I guess, a different perspective on how to approach games than maybe I once did. I remember just hearing you talk about dudes who kind of hit like glass ceilings when it comes to playing a game like PUBG, where they could be doing better if they would just kind of clue in to positioning and think a little bit about the map and think about where the other players are going to be and what kind of state they'd be in and whether they'd be pushing or retreating and how you can treat those kinds of that kind of game knowledge, right? Which is something that TFC really encouraged because you're always keeping track of the score and where's the flag for each team and who's alive and who's dead and is there a lane that's open you can exploit. Um, I remember one very specific moment back in my TFC days where I just got completely. I realized I was behind the curve because I couldn't bunny hop. And I don't.
Feeling
I got
inadequate.
somehow I got away with it for a while. I don't know how. I played defensive soldier pretty much exclusively, but there was a match, and I think it was being shoutcasted by someone. I remember watching the replay, and we were playing Zero Tolerance, which were one of the super clans of that era of TFC, and Rentonite, who was like, you remember Rentonite? He was,
Yeah, I still talk with him.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
but at the time, Rent was a prodigy at the game, and he bunny hopped around me, made me look like a fucking idiot, and then went off to get the flag from our team. I think I was like top spiral 2 for it or something. I remember watching that and just feeling so embarrassed and was like, oh fuck, I gotta figure out how to bunny hop. And you were one of the people that I came to. I remember. I don't know how it happened, but I remember being in a server with you in Well, and I was trying to bunny hop across the moat in front of the base. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's the assault heavy weapon guy, glide jump, strafe jumping
Yeah,
test.
that.
I still, we, I still did that. Like, if you remember Spike from the Catacombs Discord,
Yep.
him and his friend, he was like, you gotta come and like play with this guy. He knows like a lot of stuff about the game. And so I was like, yeah, dude, like, first of all, like, you don't know how to move in the game. But in his defense, he's been playing on what is that server that's Drippy's 2 for whatever. Like, it's all nerfed. You can't move on that server.
Yeah, even if
They've
you know it, you can't use it there. It's weird.
yeah, exactly. So he would never really know, right? But so I was showing him that well jump, that strafe jump. It's like Gob called it gliding. The guy who invented this maneuver.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so like that was the test. But you should have been a heavy weapon guy to jump across the well water.
Right.
That's the key. But yeah, that was like a huge part of the game of Team Fortress Classic was just learning how to glide jump, because the second jump that you did in a row, see the first jump, right? You accelerate. The second jump, you'd already be at the move cap if you did it right.
Right. You just maintain the acceleration after that, and
Yeah, and
moving around with it.
people who are bunny hopping are were tending to just go left and right like a sine wave pattern across the vector of where they're trying to go, right? So trying to go
Yep.
to point A to point B, their trajectory follows like a sine wave along that line to the end. But if you just learn how to accelerate optimally using strafing on the ground, you can basically get point A to point B in a straight line, moving at that movement cap, and you end up going faster. You'll see a lot of players that'll accelerate with a few bunny hop jumps, and then they kind of get to like the place where they need to get to that next corner around the next hallway, and then they kind of just try to keep jumping straight ahead to
Yeah.
get there, because they know, like, in their head, they're sort of conceptually, they know what they're trying to do, but they can't quite do it, because every jump after that is just a straight ahead, like a rock skipping on a pond, right? They're not actually like
Right.
continuing their
Ra-
acceleration. But if
Rather
you
than
get good enough at it,
actually integrating all the mechanics, they're just like kind of think, okay, this is what I do if I want to move fast. And they're executing that procedure, but it's a little bit rigid unless you kind of get comfortable with some of the mechanics within that sine wave bunny hop.
right, you can use both, right? But you don't want to always just be doing the sine wave bunny hop, because your distance total traveled is like, for 50% longer than if you just went from point A to point B straight,
Also, it was
which you
easy to
can do if you
predict
just got.
if you've seen it before, right?
Yeah. So like that was a big deal of I mentioned Major Gobe. He was like a famous heavy weapon guy in the assault class in Team Fortress Classic, but he taught a class on this movement, because with heavy weapon guy, being able to start and stop quickly and surprise your opponent by being in a place that they wouldn't expect you to be with the assault cannon going full power. Obviously, it was a big deal playing that class. And you couldn't really bunny hop and move with the assault cannon. I mean, you could before they capped it, but it was still tricky. It took a while to wind up and get going fast enough, and you'd be out of ammo by the time you got to where you wanted to go, keeping the
Yeah.
assault cannon firing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we taught that. We merged with his heavy weapon school with Code of Honor, which I think you ended up helping with later too, right?
Yep. I was involved
Yeah,
back
I
when
see where you're
after I
going
got a
with
clue.
this. After we after we taught you. But yeah,
Yeah,
so it was
I have a
funny
lot to
going
learn.
back
There is a
just
lot to
last
learn.
year.
Uh-huh.
It was funny going back last year with that guy Spike on the Catacombs Discord and teaching him how to do that. He obviously couldn't do it. Neither could his friend. So it was like a lost art in the game, right? It's kind of a trip to think about.
That is a trip. That is a
The
trip.
players that are still playing Team Fortress Classic on Drippies have no idea that none of this stuff even exists.
Blows my mind people are doing that. But again, also it blows my mind that the in-house community exists. You're familiar with them, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And one of the funny things about them is like they've played the game so much with themselves. It's like the what is Neil Stevenson and Anthem? The staring into your belly button happens with the wise men in the cave that never leave and start to become
Uh,
blind to the outside world.
uh-huh.
There's things that we would do, like in Code of Honor, we would teach. I'm sure you remember you and I teaching other people on open fire to like do the rotations with 4 soldiers on defense. And when
Yep.
one dies, you just rotate counterclockwise or clockwise, whichever way you're rotating, and you're filling in that position, right? And then like the rest of the team rotates behind them.
Right.
But like if you play in house or watch in house, they never rotate or do any of that shit. They just go back to their stand at their position, hoping that, they'll move up and whatever, like reposition when the flag moves. But there's not like that filling the gap, the whole it doesn't really occur like it did when you had a legit team that played together all the time, right?
Yeah, it's
Because it's like a
in-house is
different
really
team every
cool.
time.
Like so in-house being what it is, which is the last, echoes of the old competitive TFC scene that played capture the flag. Um, it's cool that that's there, but what you said is right. Like having those kinds of clan based those kinds of strategies that took clans to pull off. Or it's like, okay, I know that
Yeah.
you and you are going to be our soldiers. This is going to be our strategy for this map. If here's our general rotation strategy for when people go down. Here's what you're going to do. And those kinds of things, they're not um, they don't live in pickups. You know, um, they tend to be more embodied by the clans that were playing the competitive matches at those times. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I don't know, it's a different thing. Like they play a different it's a little different style. It's obviously more evolved, it's faster. But
Yes,
also
very fast.
part of that's because it's just 4 on 4 and there's no crossfire, there's no congestion, it's less chaotic because you don't have the
Yeah,
offense and
that
defense playing.
the whole dynamic of having a multi-dimension team with OND is not there. It's just
Yeah, but at the same time, I wish that we had thought about doing that during the Team Fortress Classic era. Like when we brought the game to CPL, we had to bring like 8 or 10 teams the first time. It might have been more than that. 16 teams for the first tournament. Like you had to get like 150, 200 people all to play like a tournament. Whereas if you had just done OVD 15 minutes, switch sides, the matches are over in half the time, and you only need 4 players.
yeah,
It
would
would
have been
have
easier
been
to
like
manage and way more spectatable.
yeah, and then the game could have also been updated. Had we done that sooner, I think Valve would have been more likely to add that kind of thing into the server,
Although the
just
one
as a built-in
thing
feature.
that would have robbed the game of are those last minute like we're down by one cap moments, but there's 5 minutes to go. And we've got to push our advantage and try to create a hole. Like there's this heavy weapons guy that's just destroying us. Let's get him down. Let's take down the sentry gun and we'll make a push. Like that moment where it's heads up and it's win or lose, you kind of lose that tension a little bit in OVD. I feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah. And also, like, if you score 5 in 15 minutes and the other team scores 6 in 7 minutes, then that's the end. Whereas teams tended to play it out in TFC because of just it was happening at the same time.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it was different. I mean, yeah, it's much better, I would say, but there's trade-offs. I'm having there be fewer people. It's more in line with I think the way things have evolved. Where I think 6 with Overwatch is probably the most that you'll see for any kind of like esport type of
Yeah.
team.
Yeah, getting 9 people together to
6 in
play
Overwatch.
a competitive game just turns out to be pretty tough.
Yeah, it was rough. 9, 8, 10. We did 10 for some maps. It was even harder.
Yeah, yeah, like the Canal Zone and CZ2 type maps.
Yeah, you'd always have like someone ringing for your team or someone fill in one more player.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So this is awesome. I love reminiscing about TFC. I could do for hours, honestly. But I want to hear a little bit more about how did you said to me about with Fortress Forever that it sounds like maybe you were involved. How did you get involved with that project? Let's just put it that way.
So yeah, I mean, I was very well. I was prominent in the community, so like people already knew about me. Everyone knew of me,
Yeah, no,
and they
everyone
knew
knows the
that.
Dospac, of course.
Yeah, yeah. They. I mean, I don't. I think I was approached to come on and just help with kind of getting the game. So in the first push to like ramp up production on the game, they brought me in to just work on the gameplay design. Um, at that time, everyone was just kind of doing whatever they could do for the project. So since I didn't have like any formal coding skill or anything, I was mainly doing high level design, sort of fixing the classes that were broken, like especially Pyro. Um, and then I did a lot of just the QA testing as things got more like as our beta started, the closed beta, the private beta, whatever we called it. I was pretty much in charge of doing the beta testing, and it was more like a lot of the I don't know you want to say like the administrative side of it, but it was like getting people to show up for the beta tests, doing
Yeah,
interviews, doing all the media. I did all like the press, the interviews, email correspondence, or live or whatever. The game had quite a bit of interest in the news, the game media, especially because a lot of the guys, like I mentioned, the Maximum PC, the PC Gamer, the PCXL was gone, but some of those guys went on to be all the PCXL guys ended up being editors in chief of other magazines. They were all huge Team Fortress, fanatics still, that many years later. So they were really interested. I mean, we had like 2-page spreads in a lot of these magazines, which is pretty unheard of for a mod. You might get like a
That is
little
cool.
you can make a side panel, like a little blurb at the edge of a game review of a similar type of game or something.
Yeah.
But our media, like our art guys, like all those guys were really good. I mean, we had like really, really good people doing the graphic, texturing, map making, all that stuff. All those people went on to be or were already working in the industry. So, I mean, like immediately after Fortress Forever, the guys that got jobs were all working on like A+ AAA titles, like the Battlefields, Mirror's Edge was one of them, Borderlands, Gearbox. Like I think that was one of the ones they were working on immediately after. Some of the
What about you, Kelly? You don't do game dev
I
now, right?
No, no, I didn't. So I did a lot, like I said, of the media PR crap they wanted to do. I did a lot of QA testing, and I did all the design. Like, so Kyle and I, not like the design at the high level, but we had the base for what we wanted to start the game. We wanted to begin as, the Team Fortress Classic 1.5 or whatever. But like I mentioned, we didn't start anything. We didn't copy anything from TFC other than like the move speed of the classes or something and the classes themselves. But we were like, again, so worried that Valve was going to try to like shut down the project or something, that we were stealing something from them. We just had like a informal, yeah, it's okay, do whatever you want, but you can't sell it, was what they told us.
Is that their
But
only
we were
involvement
like,
with it?
I think we were pretty secretive. We were like competitive with them, I would say, at the time. So it was
Because you
like
knew
a
the
frenemy
TF2 was a
situation.
thing?
Not until they announced it. I remember it came out like very last minute.
When
Like
was
they
it
didn't make a
announced?
big announcement.
It was pretty
Just a
close to
month.
when it came out.
Yeah, they made the announcement right around the time that Fortress Forever came out. It
Right.
was like
So
a
I have
month
here
before.
that Fortress
We'd been
Forever
announcing
came
everything
out
though.
on the 13th of September, and TF2, if you pre-ordered it, you could play it on the 18th. So it was a 5-day period where Fortress
Yeah,
Forever existed in a non-TF2 world. What was the
but they moved
feeling?
that up a month. They moved that up a month. It was a month earlier than they originally announced because they were worried everyone was going to go
Oh
and play our
man.
game. I mean, this
Oh
is my
man.
theory, but it makes sense, right? Like we had a decent amount. There was like 2 million downloads in that first weekend or something. A lot of people were playing the game,
Yeah,
and
there was a
so
lot of
like
hype around it. I was hyped.
yeah, that's what I mean. It was like I think that was I say that they did that on purpose. I have no idea, but it seems like they bumped up things to try to compete with our release. And then when TF2 came out, obviously that was kind of the end of Fortress Forever as a prominent online game. I mean, it was just very unfortunate. We've been working on this game for years and we're very open about it, right? We weren't keeping anything a secret once the game was once we unstealthed it, there was no like it was very transparent from that point on, right? And
Yeah.
Valve had not said anything. So we built this game as blood, sweat, and tears. I was probably doing 20, 30 hours a week on top of working full time at a different job during the day. And then this game like comes out, they torpedo the announcement, the whole thing is blasted because it all happened at the same time. It feels really bad, even still.
Dude, I can only imagine. Like what I'm sure that day when you guys on the team saw that announcement and started corresponding with each other, I can only imagine with what words were exchanged. Probably a lot of fucks and shits and what the hell.
Yeah, Kyle and I just basically stopped working on Fortress Forever completely. We never came back to it. We were pretty pissed.
Yeah, so
And like
here
it was just
I
because
did a little
a
bit of
lot of it was
research
how much
before
we put
we
in.
came together, and I see that here's a timeline that I have, and I was going to ask you about this. Fortress Forever, September 13th. TF2, September 18th. October 30th, your last post on the Fortress Forever forum. Like, there's a very clear picture that suggests to me of like
Yeah, I mean
Valve.
it was
It seems like Valve killed this game, and why would they do such a thing?
well, I mean, I think they were building their version of TF2 along the same timeline that we were. It just happened to be that they released at the same time. I think they definitely moved up the beta for TF2 though, in regard like to match or to compete or however you want to say it with us.
Do you
We were
think they were
giving our game
scared
away
of
for free.
Fortress Forever?
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, like internally, Valve was like really cool about everything. They weren't like competing insofar as they wanted like to drive us off the planet. You know what I mean? They were just miffed. I think that the community got a new Fortress came out first before them, and it wasn't bad. Like it wasn't like sticks and stones. It was like they released a full game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Fortress Forever now would be in that like $20 range of like you know a
Yeah.
cheap online only.
Could have gone the route of many Half-Life mods where they can publish their own unique games that you can buy,
Yeah,
like
but the
like
problem
Mesa.
also with yeah, exactly, and they didn't care. They let them do that. And then obviously, it's different. Has a lot more money now than they did back then as well. So,
Right.
but no, I mean the people inside the game too. Like you could probably ask Kyle about this, but the people who are working on Fortress Forever with us weren't people that you would necessarily want to have all on a team together. It was just they were the people who had time and were willing and compassionate about doing it. But when you have all these people who are compassionate about making this game and about Team Fortress, they don't necessarily get along. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of infighting. I mean, I'll give the example that Valve wanted to, or rather, I wanted to have Valve put the Fortress Forever release up on the Steam, blurb that comes up when you launch the game.
Naturally.
Sorry, when you launch Steam, rather, right? The
Yeah, like the
news,
new
whatever they call
games
it.
releases kind of stuff they do. Yeah.
Yeah. And now you can just pay Valve and get that. It's expensive. But back then they didn't allow that. It was just their internal like blog basically. It wasn't like commercialized like it is now. And
They
because of
weren't
that,
using it.
people
Yeah.
also yeah, and people also were much more likely to like click through on those kind of things because it wasn't just like you have 11, you restart Steam, it's been 2-3 weeks since you restarted the Steam client and you have 12 messages sitting there. Like any of those would be like a big deal back at that time. People actually read them, you know what I mean? But so Valve wanted us to put Fortress Forever release on there. It was a big thing. They were all excited. They were playing it that first weekend. And then like internally they were like, well, we have like this crash bug with the models and like it looks funky and I don't want to release it because I didn't have a chance to fix this. And it was like, dude, you guys don't understand. Getting like the best free marketing push you could have on an online platform right now with this. And they're like all fighting about it. And so we never did. Like it never happened. There was never and then people later were like, oh, it's a conspiracy. Like Valve never put
Oh
anything
man.
about Fortress Forever out on in Steam and everything, but they wanted to, like, or at least they said, okay, we'll do it. I don't know if they really wanted to, but they sort of felt indebted to us, especially Robin, because like Team Fortress was his baby, right? So it's like, your baby's having a redheaded stepchild or something. I don't know. You're a
Yeah.
grandfather now.
Yeah. Well, he feels. I'm sure he felt some responsibility. I mean, Fortress is his game, and everyone on that team was inspired by what he made.
Yeah,
And
we're talking about Robin Walker, the creator of Team Fortress Software, which is the Australian mod team that made Quake World TF for Quake World back in the day, and ended up working on. He was the lead on TF2, and then he worked on Dota, and now he's working on the Half-Life Alex project. I think pretty much exclusively at Valve now. I mean, he has been
yeah,
for a while now.
I saw him on
Sorry.
an interview that was done by NoClip. Are you familiar with that YouTube channel?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he looked terrified to talk about doing another Half-Life game. You see
yeah.
it?
I think the guys. I mean, yeah, like the guys at Valve all know, like it's you just have to put yourself in the life situations, right? Like you're like a teenager, you're late teens, you're learning how to code, you like come up with this great idea, you get compassionate about it, you start your career, you you work for 10 years on Half-Life 1 and 2, and then you make a ton of money, you have a few kids, now you're middle aged. Do you want to go and put 5 years of your life into making like the epic follow up Half-Life 3 when you could just sit back and not have to worry? And they've been paying other
Enjoy
people
having a
for
life.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they've been paying other people to, all the game. Think about all the Valve games, like even going back to Counter Strike, like it's Counter Strike, Dota, which was a Warcraft 3 mod, which I ironically joked at one point about with Robin. I was like, you guys should just pay the guy from fucking Dota to go and make Dota 2 on Source. He's like, they probably already had done that, But my company published Dota 2 in China, so we had like a whole back end connection with Dota 2 with them as well.
Company
I
was
worked at
that?
Perfect. I worked at Perfect World Entertainment, which was a U.S. subsidiary of a Chinese company that made RPGs.
Uh huh.
But Torchlight is probably the most well-known U.S. game that they published.
Yep, definitely no Torchlight. And what was
And
your
then
other
obviously,
involvement with that company? What else did you work on?
yeah. So they knew about me working on Fortress Forever, and they were interested in basically starting. They wanted to publish a free-to-play first-person shooter. So they had always done RPGs, but they had a company, they had a dev studio in Seattle that they'd signed like a really good deal with to make a free-to-play shooter to basically transfer Blacklight Tango Down, which was a Xbox Live Arcade title. They wanted to port Blacklight to PC like it was on Unreal, so it wasn't like that big of a port, but they wanted to move it to the, as a PC shooter and make it free to play. And this was in 2010, 11, 12 ish. So
Uh-huh.
at that time, there wasn't really like the free to play first person shooters for the US market were really bad. Like Combat Arms was one. If you know that, if you heard of that game before.
I have heard of it. Yes.
Yeah, it's like basically like it sounds bad, but it's like basically a Chinese knockoff of Counter Strike that's just added microtransactions to. And
Yep.
the gameplay was all right. The graphics were really bad. These games were meant to run on like low end integrated graphics, Windows XP, the machines that other countries maybe can't afford to have, like a super high end gaming rig like we can here. So anyway, they basically wanted me to go and work on their first person shooter because their people didn't know anything about first person shooters. They were just making RPGs. And the twofold problem was that they were US subsidiary was not really making RPGs, they were just translating RPGs.
Oh boy, that's a big difference. Localization ain't game
Yes,
dev.
exactly. So you've got like a team, like a QA team that just knows how to do localization QA. And then you've got like a studio and management and everyone who knows how to monetize RPGs. And it's a little different with a shooter. I mean, it's still the same concepts. You're selling skins and,
Right.
boosts and things like that, gain experience faster, it's similar ideas, but they actually wanted me to try out, I guess, or like, it wasn't really an interview per se. They were more interested in seeing how I could kind of operate in the free to play monetization world because I was going to be working for the publisher. And obviously our goal was to make money, not to make the game.
Right.
So I wrote like a 20, 30 page document on TF2. So basically just, theory crafting TF2 into a free to play shooter, which it later did become.
Holy shit.
Uh, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I ever sent that. I may have sent it to Robin at some point because he and I were very, and like every once in a while we would chat. Like it wasn't like a regular thing or anything. I would just shoot him a message every once in a while. But anyway, there was a lot of cool stuff that I came up with in this document. And so basically, the guys at Perfect World were like, "Hey, we saw you playing for Fortress Forever." One of the guys was involved in TFC, and I knew him in real life, sort of like a friend of a friend at that time. So he kind of knew of me through TFC. But anyway, I wrote this document and they were like, holy shit, this guy actually is like did an amazing job with this. So I ended up getting the job there. So I was working in IT. Fortress Forever had been over in 2000 and what did you say? Seven,
Yeah.
8,
7.
7. Yeah. So then in 2010, in the fall or the summer of 2010, I think, maybe the spring or summer, I started working on Blacklight Retribution, which was the free to play shooter for their, their big free to play shooter release, the first shooter title this company had published. So it was basically I was just the product manager for the game. So I was doing everything, kind of like I was in a way like in Fortress Forever. It was very similar. I was doing a lot
Sure.
of PR, a lot of
Doing a lot of producer
promotion.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, promotion of the game, managing the budget for the marketing, QA team. Kind of, they were working directly with me and with the developer. The developer didn't have their own QA team, so usually you have a couple guys in the QA at the developer, hopefully. So we were doing all of that, and they didn't have resources to host their stuff either. So we were actually running everything out of our office in Foster
Wow.
City. So like their dev platform was running on our stuff remotely. It was kind of a nightmare. They had one of the guys there would basically built this online platform and did an amazing job, but he was obviously only one person. You can only do so much.
Yeah.
The game had a lot of problems. I had a background in IT, so I helped kind of getting the closed beta and the open beta running just from the hosting standpoint. It was just at the time when cloud hosting was becoming sort of fast enough to be able to handle that stuff, but we were still running it like bare metal. We were doing our own hosting on our own boxes, but it was technologically, or there was a lot of technical problems with the game, I should say, but it ended up being okay. It didn't do great. It didn't do poorly. It kind of just broke even, I would say. But yeah, that was fun. I didn't want to continue. I mean, they closed that project down. At some point, the online games, they just cut the team because the game's already out. Like, there's not a lot going on, right? If the dev studio went out of business, so it's like, well, that's the end of that. So
Yeah.
it ended up just kind of winding down. I got out of there before there wasn't another game to work on. The whole studio kind of collapsed as far as like the operation got shrunk down a ton because again they were just translating games from China that already had been made. So
It didn't really seem
it
like
was
they were
like
set up to do that anyway. So
yeah, and they kind
interesting.
of knew this. They were trying to get like they bought Cryptic Studios from Atari, so like Star Trek Online came out. I think
Mhm.
Neverwinter was being released later. Neverwinter Online, whatever it was, not Neverwinter Nights, but the online one. It was like a WoW clone basically. but they were
One
just
of the many.
kind of they were stuck, and it was like a lot of work. You have to work, all nighters, and just you're missing your wife's birthday and holidays and things. You're working because the game servers have to be on for you to make money in a free to play shooter. You're running a service. You're not just selling them a game up front and then
Right.
patching once or twice and then being done with it. So a lot of technical problems means a lot of a lot of work for me, especially with a technical background where I could actually fix these things, or make sure they were fixed. I had a higher standard, I would say, than maybe I would have otherwise, which was great for the game. When I left, the thing fell apart, like stuff didn't run anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Sometimes
anyway,
projects like that have a lot of systems and technical debt rely on a handful of very effective people. Sounds like you were one of them.
yeah, I'll just say like we set up an East Coast and West Coast server cluster, and they had SQL databases that were mirrored, and the ops guys never put the drives in RAID on the West Coast cluster, so the game was down for 4 days while they tried to figure out why there was only 20 gigs of data being synced between the 3 terabyte, 4 terabytes of
Oh
RAID
my
arrays on the East
god.
Coast. Yeah, it was that level of yeah, they didn't know what they were doing. It wasn't their fault. Like I said, they were handed a game that was done in Chinese, and they had to basically translate it to English and then hit go. Like they didn't know how to do actual, like, shooters have a much higher level of technical demand on you know what I mean? Like it's like
Yep.
lower latency. You have to have
Yep.
smaller the shard, the
They're
server
a lot
structure
more
is different.
sensitive to those kinds the kind of technical infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. And it was all being built brand new by a team here versus, you know, the mothership from China handing them the executables.
Yeah.
So anyway, but there
Interesting.
was a guy from Cryptic Studios who was like you said, the small team. Like he came over and had their guys rewrite like everything to be automated as far as management of the software backend, and like updates and patches. We used all of their tech because there was no, like, we didn't have our own patching system. Our developer didn't know how to write one, so it was kind of a nightmare. They actually gave me a Steam clone that they were developing internally to patch the game with that wasn't working. So I took that on as a side project while I was working there and basically built up this, content delivery system like Steam. It's just think Steam, but just like a Chinese ripoff of Steam.
Sure.
So yeah, you could see like it was kind of a nightmare just from the logistics perspective.
It's like a lot of work
Yeah, it was a
to make a
lot.
game like Black Light Retribution. Huh.
But yeah, so the game was actually pretty fun. It was a cool idea. I mean, their whole thing, their like big gimmick or whatever, not the gimmick, but their big thing that they did was that they were all basically drinking one night and we're like, it'd be funny if we just put a wall hack into our game. Everyone's cheating. Why don't we just make the wall hack built into the game? Well, they were like the first guys to make that. It's like your helmet in the game, you can turn on a wall hack that just lasts for like a timer bar that fills up, right? Like an ability bar.
uh,
It
like the
actually
visor
it actually
ability in Champions, Quake Champions.
Yeah, but they were the first ones to do that. I mean, this was like on Xbox Live. The original game, Tango Down, was probably like 2000, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, it was pretty fun. It made it interesting because you could see when other players were activating it as well. So you kind of were looking back at them, you know, but then you had to manage the time, the cooldown on it, and all that. So it was interesting.
That's cool. And was that the end of your journey in game dev? What came next?
Yeah. I mean, I went back after that to my job. I worked in IT at a big accounting firm, a professional services company. So they actually wanted me back anyway. So they had a recent, someone had left the team that I used to be on. So I kind of took over a different, I didn't take over my old job, but it was something very similar. And
Sure.
yeah, I've been there ever since. So I guess I'm coming up on 15 years of total time working at my current employer, but there was a break in between of a few years. So
Well, well.
I wouldn't I
And
wouldn't go back. Like, I started a family it's like it's a young man's game. That's kind of what I got at before. Like the guys at Valve, like I can see them having a struggle of getting back into that type of life when you're out of it.
yeah, game dev being a young man's game, I think there's a lot of more exposure, generally speaking, now about how harsh it is on people to make video games. Um, you obviously lived it, but at that time, people didn't know that people were sacrificing families and lives in order to get these things made.
Yeah, I mean, most people probably didn't. If you are growing up as a teenager on your computer all night, you probably don't have like a active family life at that point. But I mean, yeah, it's a huge burden, I would say, especially with like the crunch time of release. Like when Fortress Forever was launched, the month prior, we were just like cramming, crazy hours trying to get it working, get everything done that needed to be done. So yeah, I mean, Blacklight was a little bit. I would say it was actually a little easier maybe with Blacklight, just because we had a very like well organized closed beta and then an open beta, and we did it with like, okay, we're gonna run the game for 3 days, and then we're gonna turn it off again, and then it'll be up for a week, and then it'll be up for sure after that for good, like. But we had like really well organized, game is up, game is down, fix things, game is up, game is down, fix more things. Whereas if you remember, obviously, like back in the day, once you released your game and your server code, and you couldn't take it back, right? Like, I mean, it was very difficult at
Yep.
that point to
Yep.
to do that.
Cat was out of the
So
bag.
so yeah, it was more of like the whole release early, release often versus like the monolithic, finish everything and release it. So I got both experiences, right? One from the development side, one as the publisher, but still pretty similar.
Right. Yeah, games are hard to make. I was talking with Matt and Taylor about this last week. It was part of a bigger kind of discussion about, well, are games art or are they not art? And you obviously all think they are because we're, nerd gamers. But I think that the thing that occurred was that comparing making a video game against like making a movie, against making a TV show, against making any other kind of art in any kind of medium, games has everything beaten hands down in terms of what goes into it and how hard they are to make.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. There's just, it's all of those things. I mean, you're doing all the things that you would do for a CD. You're releasing your album, or you're making a movie, or like, that's all of that stuff is in there. You know what I mean? Your game has music, it has sounds, it has like cutscenes and scripted element. Like, it's basically doing all of that all together. And then you also, as like, gamers are also way more critical. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
it's
there's
something about having your hands on the product and like actually controlling the way it runs. Like it has a different sort of expectation of what people are looking for than sitting and passively watching something.
yeah, it's startling how different it is. But when you work in the game industry, it's still a pretty small world, especially on the West Coast here. Because I mean, like, when we did our media tours, we didn't even bother going anywhere. You could just hit up LA, Bay Area, Seattle. It's pretty much everyone who's who in the world of gaming journalism for North America, with some exceptions. But you could just do online stuff. But it's very small on the development side, and everyone who's a developer knows that if you just ship your game, like if you're interviewing and you're like, oh yeah, we shipped like the whatever game, and it's like some crappy game that just didn't sell anything, it doesn't matter. You actually shipped a game. Like, that's what you need to get over. That's the hurdle you need to get over as a developer.
Right.
Whereas, like, I think fans of games like are like, oh, you need to have like a 9 or higher out of 10 review or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they have like a much different scale of like whether or not you did a good job or not.
Right.
In the inside of the industry, it's whether or not you just shipped anything, like whether it came out. That's how hard it is to make a game. Like,
Right.
so many projects die before they ever
Did your work
reach
actually
that day.
manifest into something that someone can play?
Yeah, like, that's what people care about.
Uh, damn, what a tough world.
Yeah,
Are you
but
happier
it
now
was.
to be just a player of games as opposed to a maker of them?
Yeah. I mean, it's. I was always obviously playing games. I never played them like religiously. Like, I was never like losing myself. I always had like another life. Like, I always had like a girlfriend. I always had like a job. And I never let it like get to the point. Like, it was never the only thing in my
You
life.
weren't
But
a
I think that was good.
stereotypical gamer. Is
Well,
that what
yeah,
you're
and it
trying to
was just
say?
more. Well, yeah, and like, no, just as far as like your balance in life, right? So I never stopped playing games because I was never like played them. I never played WoW and like lost my job and spent 4 years in my basement. Like, I just played here and
Oh, you're gonna
there,
go there,
but
are
like,
you? We're talking about spending 4 years in the basement playing WoW. Yeah. So
I'm
I
just
you forgot about this, but I have you to thank for turning me on to World of Warcraft all the way back in the day. I don't know if you
friends
remember this
don't let friends
conversation yet.
play World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I remember. I remember. I don't even remember the context, but you're like, "Hey, man, WoW beta. This is really cool. You should sign up for the beta," and I did. Um, and yeah,
If I
and I
gave you my account, if I gave you my account, then you could blame me on this, because I did give I had two closed beta accounts that I got from Blizzard. So early, like the very first closed beta, because you have connections if you start knowing people in the industry. So
yeah,
even back then. But yeah,
yeah.
no,
I don't
you
know.
played a lot of WoW. That's you quit TFC to play WoW, right? I'm
I
assuming everyone did.
mean, I quit TFC and then later I started playing WoW. It made it easier to not come back to TFC, I guess. But yeah, I started in Oh God, 2000. Yeah, around 2005. So that kind of lines up. And then I quit it for good in 2009.
And you didn't go back to WoW Classic.
Oh yeah, I did.
What do you
Oh yeah,
say?
man.
Quit for good.
No, I quit WoW retail. Okay. Uh,
Dude, we're talking about WoW retail, bro. I've been playing WoW Classic since it came out every night.
you have been?
No, you're speaking like a true junkie. You're like, no,
Oh.
I don't play WoW anymore. I
Oh no,
quit that a long time
I'm a
ago.
true junkie. I'm just blaming you. That's all. You're my dealer. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, WoW Classic is not WoW. That's WoW Classic. Okay, it's different, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the blue meth.
It's more refined. Yeah. No, I picked up WoW Classic because I felt like I needed to get. I wanted to get back into it to kind of see if have I saw it differently than I did all those years ago. And I hit it hard for 2 months, and then I essentially killed Ragnaros, the big boss at the end of the first raid tier. And I was like, okay, you know
Yeah.
what? That's enough. I'm good.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like for me with games, and I know maybe we're different this way because we've talked about it before. But like when I play a game, like I'm looking for an experience that's just new, insofar as like it's a game that makes me like think in a different way or whatever. Like it's an archetype that doesn't exist in my head yet.
Uh-huh.
And when I played WoW, I was like, well, this is cool. But then like I played it in the closed beta, and I was like, well, I've kind of done everything in this game like at the time, right? I mean, like level cap was 30, 40. It went up
Right.
10 levels at a
Right.
time through the closed beta. Like I pretty much played like Diablo. Like these are like it's the same game. You just kind of keep playing and getting better stuff slowly. The more time you spend, the more better stuff you'll get. But like doing that better, like it's still the same thing to me. Like it's the same experience. And WoW was obviously like far and away better than the other MMOs at the time.
Yeah.
But it
Well.
just wasn't a new. It was EverQuest with like a paint of coat of paint and like fast travel or whatever. Like it was. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like it was just the same old
Yeah. Yeah, and to get back
thing
to
had
the
already been
the
done.
point you make about the way we approach games differently, like I think the thing that appealed and appeals to me about WoW is got less to do with the game mechanics, but and more to do with the way that the game mechanics encourage kind of the way people connect with each other over the game. Like, I basically Taylor here has been trying to get me to play Dishonored for a whole year. He actually bought me the game for Christmas in 2018. Um, and I just haven't played it because I don't play single player games. I'm really only interested in stuff that has the potential to result in some kind of a human system where I'm collaborating with or competing against other people, and we're building something that maybe is to the side of the game. Like that's what I loved about TFC too. Like for me, yeah, of course I like playing Team Fortress Classic, but for me, after a short time, all my time in that game became about the clan that I was running. And as soon as that clan ended, I stopped playing.
Yeah, no, totally. That it was all about. I mean, the same thing. Like we were building something in TFC, right? It was outside of the game, insofar as it wasn't like leveling your clan in Two Fort to level 5. But yeah, like that was a big part of it. It was also just like the journey of the self through that game, right? Like there's so many different things to do. We already talked about offense and defense,
There are a
but
lot
then
of crucibles to face. Like, oh shit, I
right,
can't bunny hop.
yeah, like or I need to like learn how to like rocket jump, or I need to learn how to
Yep.
conch jump. Like
Or
you
how
could
do I
learn how to conch
rotate?
jump. Like
Yep.
conch jumping was like a whole community of itself. Like all they did was just play maps where you conch jump. Like that's how in depth that was. And this wasn't like a small community. This was probably like thousands of players at the time who were doing that.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I guess that's where games diverged, right? Because now if you're playing an action title, you don't really have that freedom. And if you're playing an RPG, it's baked into the game like 100%. I mean, you're just following the framework that the game provides, and you can't really go outside of it, at least not in the WoW version of that. Other games, I'm sure, have more
The
like,
classic was a big
you know,
exception because their whole ethos with it was to bring back exactly what it used to be. But that makes an exception by definition. But well, your observation is correct, and I've struggled with this too about with modern games. I played stuff like Destiny and like Warframe, and my complaint with all those games is they're supposed to be social. They're advertised as it. You're playing with someone all the time, but it doesn't actually require you to collaborate. It doesn't actually encourage like community skill sharing and building, and there's no lasting connections that come out of those experiences like the clans we made in TFC that are relevant 20 years later.
man, that we're still here in some organizational level. because of. But yeah, I mean, I guess that is really the difference is now, since it doesn't cost anything to make one, to make that, or whatever you want to say, it doesn't cost anything on the organizational level as far as a commitment of learning.
Yeah.
You don't have to have knowledge and commit time to doing so, so that, I mean, we noticed this during TFC, right? Like in later parts of TFC, like other games were coming out where like the teams were just forming, and like in Counter-Strike, you're like, oh, like team of the week, and then we started seeing that in TFC where people were
Yeah.
just coming together to make a team and play, and then that might be it. It might just be gone, and they all kind of scramble again, and another arrangement of the same 15 to 30 players would make the next four teams. Like they kept on just reorganizing. It was very chaotic.
Yeah, that was a weird
But
phenomenon of like um, the same loose group of players making the same things. Like there was the group of players who always played in the super clans. Um, there were I wasn't really aware of a lot of the stuff in the lower divisions, but yeah, in the upper divisions, as I was exiting, I started to see that phenomenon take place.
well, there was teams all. I mean, it wasn't about. I don't think at this. I don't think it mattered how well, like what division or what the skill level. I think it was there were older teams with older people, and they tended to stay together. I mean, like
Like
404
404.
was, yeah, there was 4 or 5 years with basically the same core players, people
Yeah,
leaving
that
and
was a very
joining. But
stable thing you guys had going.
I mean, can you imagine having like? I was in TDA for 3 years, so I mean, can you imagine being on a team like now? Like, there's there are teams like, and they're winning. Like the top team in Dota 2, they fielded the same team 2 years back to back, and they won both years back to back. Well, guess what? That's the first time that's ever happened in Dota 2.
Really?
Yeah, if you haven't watched the documentary series they do on the title, like the tournament, the yearly tournament, the international,
Right.
you should watch it. You should watch it every year. It's really good.
Maybe I'll check
The
that out.
last two,
Yeah, my
the last two were very good.
my wife's little brother has was at least at one time really interested in that scene, and he was going to those tournaments every year he
Yeah,
could. Basically, I know it's an enormous thing. Um,
yeah. You should.
to be
It's
honest
about
with you, though,
45 minutes.
I've kind of
They're pretty fun.
fallen out of playing purely competitive stuff in my later years. I don't know what it is. Something about the not feeling the need to compete like head to head like I used to. Like it doesn't mean as much to me. I noticed you're still playing PUBG though.
Do you have low T? Is that why?
Maybe. How would I find out?
You need to consult your doctor.
Okay.
No, but yeah, PUBG is still like a competitive shooter. It's still pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'm I'm surprised that you wouldn't play it with us though. Like even Kyle was back on playing with us the other day. We got a win with him. Fish.
I give it a try. Honestly, I find the thing that matters more to me about games, the whole mechanical skill component of it doesn't matter as much to me as it used to. Like I don't care as much about being considered good, and because of that, I care less about beating other people, because, and that just rolls up into being like competition is not actually the most important thing to me. I tend to gravitate towards games that maybe have a less of an emphasis on competition and more on cooperation as a result, which ends up meaning that I play games like Warframe and Destiny and World of Warcraft Classic, because
Yeah, that
I
surprises me though, 'cause I
much more
would
like
say
the
the
social
same
component.
thing. Yeah, no, I would agree. Like maybe you're more on the social side of it, but of what you said though, I would basically say the same exact thing. Like that's why I play PUBG, because the team play element in squads is just incredible. The
Honestly, I haven't given it
coordination
a
between your
shot,
team.
so maybe if I do, I'll change my tune on it. But something
I don't
about
play like,
the tension of it always seemed a little bit uncomfortable.
yeah, I mean, especially in the beginning playing it, it gets pretty extreme. Like, you get the heart. There's people that streamed with their heart rate monitor in battle royale games, right? That became a thing. So it's like live on the screen in Twitch.
What do you think about a
But
game like Planetside 2 compared against PUBG?
well, I mean, like the whole thing with PUBG is just that your accomplishment. So like, it's very hard to like. It's very hard to like mimic the. It's like it's the classic. You drop with your team of 4 players. You probably it's in my case. It's most people. Well, it depends, but most nights it's people who I know on. Sorry, people I know in real life that we're playing together with.
Uh huh.
So we already have like that dynamic with each other. But it's just really fun to drop. Like you drop into the same city, and it's like the city is a full city insofar as like all the buildings you can go into, right? Like that was always the thing when we were kids. Like, man, it'd be so cool if there was a game where the buildings
Right?
weren't just all like facades, and there was like,
Where you can
you
go
could go up on
inside
the
of
third
them,
floor
look out the
and look out of
windows.
that window. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
exactly. And like it'd be so cool if it was on like a full scale. Like, it's like a real it's like quote unquote real life insofar as the tactics that you would use then would be quote unquote real. So having that like just dropping with four other your four players, and then go down, parachute down into the town at the start, and there's another team of four players that parachute down on opposite side of this town, and then you just basically have this cat and mouse game that goes on with you four and them four, which is usually resolved in a few minutes. It's it's like incredible. I mean, that's just like the very start of the game. Like that's not even like the highlight of that game. Like you win that team fight and you're like, all right, what's next? But like the tactics that go into that scenario of like clearing a side of the building, like watching sight lines and expecting them to have to cross like certain,
Yeah.
there's a street they have to cross. Okay, like I'm gonna hold this angle, leaving one player back to watch,
It's like
sort of
playing with Nerf guns
eyes
as a
on.
kid. It's what you imagine it would be.
Yeah, laser tag, anything. Yeah, so you're keeping your eyes. One person basically stays back typically, like to keep eyes, and then three players are going to push an angle, and then you're going to rotate behind them and kind of clean up because once they have a player down that the other team is going to react, and so you kind of know, okay, they're going to have to move east from their position to try to get to the guy that we knocked. You can sort of predict what they're going to do. It becomes this whole meta game on top of the meta game, like where you're guessing and predicting what they're going to do. Well, if you play this game for thousands of hours, you can just basically you can kind of like work all of that in your head while you're playing. So, and then that's just, like I said, that's just the first start of like a few minutes of the game. Now, like phase two is like getting to the circle, finding another area to control. But the terrain is different everywhere. These are huge maps, like 64 square kilometers or whatever.
Right.
Like so it's like every game is different. So, I mean, like that's why battle royale was entertaining to me. Was I could play these games with my friends. We'd all work together, and like I said, the teamwork is everything. I mean, you can be a great shot at just making a difference. You're going to get wasted if you don't know how to predict what's going to happen and move to a safe place or understand how other teams are going to approach a situation that you're in. Like you're fighting a team, but then a third party joins. You know, a new challengers. So you have
Sure.
to figure out how to manage all of that. And at the same time, like there's all of these different systems. Like Repairman says, like there's so many soft skills in the game that it's impossible to describe. There's all these little things you have to be managing at the same time. How much ammunition you have, how much health you have,
Right.
your position in the circle. Do you have a vehicle? Does your vehicle have gas?
Resources, positioning,
Yeah, exactly. But it
and then
happens like very quickly.
yeah, and then the shooting component actually only happens at the very end of all that stuff, which is what you're
Yeah, and
complaining
then
about
like
with your deathmatch buddies, where they can shoot right, but maybe they don't do all the stuff before that.
yeah, and the game has the best shooting mechanics of any game.
I've
That
seen that.
not even. I mean, I think that's
That's one of
just
the
been
things that's really
accepted at this
poked out
point.
at
I
me the
think.
little bit I've seen about the game is the shooting mechanics look really robust. I'm wondering if you can. So the one battle royale I actually gave a little bit of a try to when I first came out was Apex. I'm wondering if you could give me your impression about Apex v PUBG and why you play one over the other.
I mean, yeah, it's just because of that. Apex just doesn't have any satisfaction to the kills. Like you're just pointing and clicking basically.
So the
There's
gun
not
mechanics aren't as
much
deep.
skill.
That's your thing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just not as it doesn't have like that level of intensity because of that. Like it's not
Does
hard to
PUBG
shoot. It's
have classes the way that Apex does?
I mean, no, not really. It's how you load out, right? So if you're playing solos, you just want to have a bolt action sniper rifle that you can one shot everyone in the head with,
Okay.
and then you keep an assault rifle as your close quarter. In duos, you want to have like if you're playing with just one other player, you want to probably have one player that has that bolt action, and the other player have more of a damage dealing gun, higher DPS, right? Slow rate of fire, so the damage isn't very high on the bolt action. But in squads, you pretty much all sort of play. You all are sort of you're kind of all playing everything, right? Like I usually play more of a support role insofar as I'm staying in better cover and then reacting to how my team is either doing well, like then I'll create a push, like you're staying back with the vehicle, right? You get a knock, you can use the vehicle to reposition because they have to spend resources to get their player back up, right? So in that time, you can rotate with cover. So you might be the one that's coordinating that push, or if your team gets knocked, like I said, you're the one that's throwing down smoke to protect them while you resurrect them.
It's funny. A lot of these
So
verbs you're using are verbs you could use to talk about TFC back in the
yeah,
day.
yeah. Well, that's one of the most interesting things is like I played soldier in TFC, soldier, and like you have a RPG like in Quake,
Right.
but that anticipation, and I probably told you this before, but that anticipation of firing the rockets at targets that are moving, you sort of have to know where they're trying to go in order to hit them. Like I know you played
Mhm.
soldier too, so you know what I'm saying. Like
Yep.
you're defending something and they're trying to attack you, so you're probably going to place rockets where you expect them to be or where they're trying to go, even if you're like pre-firing the ceiling when you think there's a guy that's going to conk in or whatever.
Yeah, there's always a push
But like,
pull between trying to anticipate versus saving your magazine so you can be ready for the death match when it does hit you.
yeah, or just like firing one and reloading again. A lot of people did that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But either way, like that skill set though is like it transfers in PUBG because most of the engagement distances that you're playing, unless you're like in close quarters in the same building, you have to predict their movement because you're leading the shots. The game has, the air
Has real
resistance
bullet
and bullet
mechanics.
physics.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you have to lead, and as the bullet fire travels farther, it slows down. So it does less damage, and you have to lead more. And that leading is exponential. It's on a curve, right? So I mean, there's a range statistic on the gun that determines this, but it was very much like shooting. Like if you're 300 meters away, it's basically like using the RPG because you're leading by like, I don't know how you describe it on the screen, but you're like pointing the shots like 10 feet in front of them, right? And they're running into them.
Yeah.
But then once they know they're being shot at, then they start like buzzing like a bee back,
And
taking
they
a,
start juking, yeah. Trying
they
to
start juking.
right.
But then so you get better and you're like, well, I'm going to shoot the first two shots because by the time the first shot gets there, the second one is already on the way. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to really know. So you get two
Yeah.
shots on them while they're running. The third shot, you've got to actually pre-fire back to the right because most good players will switch direction. So you're going to like pre-fire the third shot. And then at that point, you're just going to try to anticipate where they're going.
This game sounds like
So
hell on new players, man.
yeah, it's brutal. It takes about 500 hours before you really are feeling comfortable.
Yeah. I think it's one of the aspects that kind of turned me off of trying it. But hearing this pitch, I may have to give it a shot. Um,
Well,
I'm gonna have to consider it.
it's really fun to play with people. Like I barely ever play solos because it's like a horror game. And I've been saying this for a long time, but I've seen other people saying this now that PUBG solos is like basically your whatever you want to the horror genre, the jump scare horror genre because it really is like it's brutal. I mean, it's very unforgiving in duos and squads, especially in squads. If you get shot and you're at a half wall or in a building, you can probably just you get another life. Your teammate is going to run over and get you back up, and you'll be fine.
Sure.
So it's the coordination though is like a big thing. I mean,
So like
it's
that's the
basically
thing
like
about the game that
TF2.
really gets you going is the coordination with other players. If you were just playing solo, would it still grab you the same way?
No, not at all. I would have never even bothered playing it. I didn't play it until first person was released. The third person, the game was all third person in the beginning, and it's
Really?
still predominantly third person.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that. That seems odd
yeah,
to
it's
me
very
for a
popular.
serious shooter.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, we didn't. I stopped playing it. I played a little bit. I'm like, this game's kind of fun, but and he's first person. Like, this is terrible. People are just hiding on the rooftop, peering over the edge of the,
Oh, that's the worst.
using the third person camera, and then all of a sudden, someone just stands up and murders you, and you didn't know they were there because they were completely silent doing so.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway,
PUBG is cool. Are there any games that you're looking forward to?
I mean, 2077 is going to be a big one. I'll probably buy that.
Yep.
I think everyone is probably going to be playing that for the first month or whatever.
Yeah, Cyberpunk's going to be the biggest thing to happen to gaming in years.
Yeah, that'll be the
Could you
big
imagine
release for
being
this year.
CDPR and putting that and getting ready to put that game out? What pressure?
Yeah, they have a lot of pressure. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it could bomb. Like they had to get Keanu in it. What if the game's terrible and they just hired him to pre-sell the game?
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean,
it's
whether
actually
it's terrible
awful.
or not, it was a good call.
Yeah,
Everyone
but
fucking
yeah, no.
drools over
Besides,
Keanu. Holy shit.
I know I didn't get the big thing with that. Like he's not even a gamer, so it's like whatever.
No,
But
it's this weird internet phenomenon that occurs that they wisely played up, where there are certain people who are just considered to be like the angels of the internet, and it's based on stuff that they've seen them in movies and TVs and like news stories about them. Like you've seen The Matrix and you liked it. You've seen John Wick and you think it's badass, and you hear that Keanu lives humbly and he's had these horror stories in his past, but he has no scandals. So like everyone's just like, oh, Keanu's a god because he's a decent person who's made a few good movies,
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
and
everyone wants
he's
to be associated with him.
yeah, and it's yeah. There's like this aura because of that. I don't know. We'll see. It might be a good game. I haven't pre-ordered it. Did you pre-order it?
No, I don't pre-order stuff.
Yeah, I'll have to see how it looks. But I mean, I'll be playing it. I just played Fallen Order. You asked me about other games,
Right?
the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. You still haven't played it.
I haven't gotten to it yet. I probably will start it up next month when I have some more time to work on it. But I love Star Wars, so I'm definitely gonna get to it.
You should play it just for the story. Like, you just put it on the easiest setting and run through the game.
How
It'll
did you
take
like it?
10, 15 hours. No, it was really good. It's awesome.
Yeah, I have this thing with games where I have a hard time playing on easy mode because I feel like I'm ignoring a part of the game. And if I ignore a part of the game, I might not enjoy it all. It's this weird. Have you ever
All
had
right.
that
Well,
kind of inclination with the
yeah.
game where it's like I have to do everything, otherwise I'm not going to enjoy it? Um,
Yeah, well then do it on the second to hardest setting is what I started and played it on. But I had a
okay,
lot of experience with melee games, melee
yeah,
combat games,
I
chivalry
just
and
did
Mordau.
right. Although to be fair, I did do that with Witcher recently after the Netflix series came out with Henry Cavill or Cavill.
Yeah, did you go back and play the game?
Yeah, I jumped in. I played the first few parts of the main story on and basically story mode because I quickly realized that I had no desire to re-engage with the game's mechanics at all. But the story was fun.
Yeah, I would probably read the book. I don't think I would play the game.
Yeah. Now games have become a much bigger medium than they once were. You know, you and me, in some ways, are the niche audience now of players who want something that's really you can really dig into. Like you talking about PUBG, me the way I talk about a game like say World of Warcraft or whatever. It seems like gaming is opening up to a whole bunch of other people, and I don't know. It's as much as sometimes I look at the games getting made and feel like they're not really for me, and that kind of discourages me at times. I think it's really cool to see games taking over, man.
Yeah, they're definitely there's games for everyone now. Like my wife and my daughter play a Roblox game together. I mean, how wouldn't have said that even 5 years ago. Like, I mean, clone my life back to 5 or 10 years ago. That
Uh
wouldn't have been
huh.
the case. You know what I mean?
Uh huh. So you have a games positive family going on.
Yeah, yeah. Like, you have to do your life, and then
Yeah.
it's like It's raining on Sunday evening or whatever. You're going to be watching a movie or playing a game or whatever. It's all the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. I had the neat experience with my wife where when we first met, she was very anti games. She thought they were actually pretty bad for you, but I managed to get her turned on to an MMO called Guild Wars 2, and
Oh yeah.
kind of pulled back the veil for her. I'm like, here's what games have meant to me. Now you get to experience it. And she's pulled back from that now. She's moved on to other stuff. She doesn't really play games much, but she gets what I like about them, which is it's really cool to have had that experience, and to have seen that continuum through her eyes of being like, games are dumb and bad for you, or games are cool and have like interesting stuff. Like she's very supportive of the work I'm doing here, with talking to folks like you and building this community of ours.
Yeah, yeah, like it's cool that she kind of got it after that, right? Because that's how, like a lot of people start from. It's very polarizing in the beginning, right?
Yes, yeah, and a lot of people just don't get it. A lot of people in our generation don't understand what games could be for. It was a small hobby when you and I were kids, and I think that probably I maybe you had this experience too when you were growing up that your interest in games was seen as something that you would just grow out of when you became an adult, or else you would suffer for it.
Yeah, yeah. There was very much that whole, oh, you still are playing those games? Like my grandma asking me or something.
Right. Yeah, it's like admitting to playing with Legos or playing with sucking on a pacifier or something.
I still wet the bed.
Right. Right. And
But yeah, no.
only when I play
it,
video
it
games.
is. It's only, yeah, only when I'm playing in my bed. I'll tell you, there was a guy in 404 who his mom and dad were like shut-ins. They were like morbidly obese, and because of this, he was like a normal guy. Like he wasn't overweight or anything. I mean, he wasn't even like he wasn't even disabled or whatever.
Okay.
But they had like a hospital bed with like a what do you call it? Like an arm that moves. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
a what's the word for that? A telescoping, no, a articulating arm. And he had his whole computer on this computer. He had like a CRT monitor and a tower on this hospital bed, like great hospital grade arm. He had it over his bed and he would play in his bed. He sent this picture to us. This was like 2000 or 2001. He was like, yeah, my folks don't get out a lot, but they got this extra bed. So this is how I play in bed. I don't have a desk.
That's badass.
I know. And I was like, dude, that's actually pretty sweet.
I
He's
don't know if
like,
I want
yeah,
to have
it's
a
comfortable.
CRT hovering over my head though. That's scary.
You fall and crush your dick or something.
Jesus, I remember hauling around CRT monitors, LAN parties back in the day. That'll put you if you get decent core workout hauling those things around.
Yeah, they're crazy heavy, especially later on, right? Like they were already getting bigger and more powerful and better. And 21-inch monitors were like 100 pounds if you were
Yeah,
lucky.
yeah, yep. Yeah, I think I had a 19-incher, flat screen, 100
Yeah, I
hertz
had a
refresh rate, something like that. Actually, CRT refresh rates work differently. I don't remember exactly
yeah,
how
well,
it
it
works, but they
redraws
were
the whole
different.
image every time.
Yeah,
I had a flat LG. I had a CRT, but with like a flat screen, like you said. It was an LG. It was really good. I mean, it would do 1600 by 1200 at like 75 or 85 hertz or something, which it took a
yeah,
long time for LCDs to catch up to. That's why it's funny. Like, oh, 1080p, it's like the big deal in the late 2010s or 2000s, whatever. You know what I mean? 2007, 8, 9.
yeah, yeah.
Like 10 years before that, I had a monitor that was basically the same resolution, just different aspect ratio. It's just
Right.
funny how things work.
Yeah, I remember that having that feeling when I was crashing back into the hobby of PC gaming in like the mid 2010s, and buying all new hardware. And I was like, wait a second. So you're telling me the LCDs that are out now don't refresh as fast as the CRTs I played with like 8 years
Yeah.
ago? What? That doesn't make sense to me. And now like it's pretty common. Like the gaming monitors will have high refresh rate. People are starting to figure out that that's good.
Yeah, but just now, like just recently, right? It hasn't been like I still have 120 hertz monitor. I'm gonna probably buy a new one soon, but
You seen that 360 hertz
100.
reveal?
Yeah, I mean the big thing is input lag, right? So
Yep.
that's the big one when you're talking about overall latency from your hand to the monitor to the net to the internet. The whole combination and back.
Right.
Latency is more important than refresh rate. I mean, they're obviously related, but you can have a high refresh rate and have a high latency, or you can have a little bit lower refresh rate and better latency. So there's a lot
Sure.
of factors involved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the monitor I use, my daily driver is a 240 hertz with a sub 1 millisecond response. So I think it's pretty decent.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's guys now that have high speed cameras because the high speed cameras are cheap, and they're
Uh,
doing testing on how many frames. Like at 10,000 FPS, you can go down to 1 point blah millisecond, so you can really tell how long things are taking to render on the screen, and that's really the best way to test them. So there's a good website. I think I've linked it in the Discord before, but you should check it out if you haven't, just to see. Like you're probably right. Like any of the 240 ones are really good,
I'll
but it's
have a
kind of
look at
cool to
that.
see
Interesting.
all of them basically in a spreadsheet. You can sort the columns by all those those different categories.
Interesting. Yeah, because I always felt like the stats around these monitors they're not there's not enough put up by the manufacturers to make great choices all the time. Like, yeah, I know it's
Yeah,
sub 1 millisecond response time, but like, how far below 1 millisecond is it, and how's it compared to other monitors? It's hard to tell. Um, and also, this monitor has G-Sync, but what's the range that it activates in? G-Sync, I love G-Sync, Active Sync, Adaptive Sync. That technology is one of my favorite things to become mainstream in video games. That is an improvement over the old days of having to just get away with VSync and that awful input lag.
yeah. There's still some lag too. If you cap your frame rate below your G-Sync monitor's refresh rate by a couple of frames, then you can mostly mitigate the
Yeah,
input lag
yeah,
that's associated with it. But if you don't, or if your GPU is running at very high utilization, then you're going to be blown away on the input lag. So yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, that's my world now because I'm in PUBG. It's like any competitive shooter, you're going to have,
you want
those
max
are
FPS.
actually
Yep,
important. Yeah,
lower response times, trying to get all that advantage. Yep, and if you're playing a competitive game where you've highly developed your skills, you actually notice those differences. Whereas, Joe Schmo playing Fortnite is probably going to be fine with a 5 millisecond response, 60 hertz display, running at 4K, because they just don't know the difference. And that's the size of the
yeah,
gaming hobby for you, right there.
yeah. That's the full spectrum, right?
Takes all kinds. Well, speaking of taking all kinds, we've got this for an hour and a half, man, which is awesome. Um, I have just
Yeah, I
a
think we're
couple of fun questions to bounce off of you, and then I'll let you go.
yeah, definitely.
So I was doing some research on the inimitable Dospac on the interwebs, and I stumbled across some interesting things. Um, and I wanted to follow up with you on a couple of specific ones. First, I wanted to know if you ever got an answer to the question of what. I'm just going to read this out loud. Uh, can anyone explain what part of urine generates bubbles when I pee into the standing water of a toilet bowl?
Yeah,
Sometimes there are
dude.
more bubbles than others. Could there be a dietary element to this? Did you ever find an answer to this question?
No, but no one replied to me. Like, what
Yeah,
the hell? Isn't
I
that a
was
good
thinking
question?
it's something I've never considered. Someone linked an article from Buzzle.com, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Oh, it's a bad link. I never even went back and checked that. It was just one day, like shower thoughts, right? I was probably like shit posting on the toilet.
Yeah, it was
But yeah,
class credit.
why does that happen? Like seriously, I still want to know.
I always figured it was just a function of velocity, but maybe I better pay better attention to it.
Dude, no, sometimes you got like tons of bubbles, and other times it's like I'm not peeing into different water, am I? It's got to be something in the urine. I just want to know.
Okay, number two. I would love to hear you retell your experience of working at the drive-through photo shop that I got to read a couple days ago.
Oh yeah, do you really want to know that story?
Hell yeah.
Wait, which one was it?
Let's see. A drive-through photo shop, finishing shop in the late '90s. A skeezy deaf guy working at the photo printer machine, keeping a big box of all the best of photos he printed doubles of.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, is that one where I also told the story of the girl that had the abortion in the toilet in the drive-through photo bathroom?
I don't think
Or
so.
sorry, a miscarriage. I apologize. I misspoke. She
Oh yeah,
miscarried a child
yeah, that's in here.
into the. Yeah, that's pretty. So yeah, basically, yeah, this girl working there who was like 16 and then had 3 or 4 kids already.
Oh my
She was
god.
pregnant. She was pregnant and complained about chest pain, whatever, and then went into the little tiny bathroom in the tiny closet in the drive-through photo finish. Like it's just a box, right? The whole place is just a tiny box. Like
Uh-huh.
it's just a drive-through. You know what I mean? We had like a tiny front counter. She's like, she starts yelling from the bathroom for the manager, who was a lady, thankfully. It's like manager goes back. This poor lady, she's like half Japanese, half white, super stoner. The manager lady, she's like
Uh-huh.
4'11". She goes back in the back and she comes like running back out of the bathroom. We're like, what? She's like, Angela had a, like, and we're like, ugh.
Oh, Jesus.
she's like, it won't flush. What do we do?
Oh my god. Oh, that's horrifying. Ugh. I'm sorry I asked. Almost. Yeah, I feel it too.
Well,
Christ.
they they had to get like the paramedics. They like probably what did they cut the
Ugh.
cord and pull it out
Oh
and
my
throw it in the dumpster or
god.
something. I don't know.
No.
I don't know, dude. It was a bad situation.
Oh
I can.
shit.
I want to thank
I
the
thought
Lord
you were
that
gonna build me up to that with, creepy photos, but you went straight to the miscarriage. Oh Jesus.
I'm just I just no, I didn't remember if I told that story in that post or not, so I just didn't know
Yeah.
how far we needed to go to get there. But what I'm just gonna say is I'm very glad I'm not a woman. I mean, thank the Lord every day that I was born with the parts that I have, or I guess I'm lacking, I should say.
They seem a bit simpler at the end of the day, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely the best work story I think I have. Maybe some other good ones, but that was from that place. But yeah, no, like the deaf guy was crazy, dude. He would just print doubles of anyone's shit that had like nudity or like drug paraphernalia. Or, like this is Berkeley, so there's a lot of students having sex and
Yeah.
things like that. Didn't have digital photography, so but yeah, a lot of drug shit, and
What a crazy
orgies.
time. It's funny, like there's just the phenomenon now of if you put a picture on the internet, you better kind of expect it to go public because like it's hard to keep control of stuff. But it's kind of funny that looking back all that time ago, that you know, you were asking someone to help you with your stuff one way or the other, and maybe he was making copies of himself for himself, and
Yeah,
maybe he's still at it
exactly.
today for all we know.
I don't know. I don't know. That business is gone. Although I guess you can work at Costco or something and make prints still, or it's all automatic though. Most.
Maybe he evolved his game. Maybe he went digital.
I hope not. That guy was creepy.
Best not to think about.
He was like Tongan. He was like Southeast Asia, like Pacific Islander. Like this huge dude who was deaf, and he wore like dark sunglasses inside all the time. So
Huh,
you never really saw his face.
creepy.
But
Well,
yeah, it was good times.
on that note, this has been really fun, Kelly. Maybe we can reconnect again later. But thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, if you want to do something with Kyle and anyone else,
Yeah,
I
I
can get
do
a
still
hold
want
of
to
all
hook
those
that up.
guys. I
Great.
have all their phone numbers and stuff, so let me know.
Cool. All right. It's a date. We'll catch you later.
Yeah, good night, sir.
Peace.